Welcome to the How to Make Feedback Work for You training overview. Feedback that is developmental is vital to an employee's ongoing development. Feedback clarifies expectations, helps people learn from their mistakes, and builds confidence. In this course, we're going to talk about how to seek feedback to become better performers in our work and how to give feedback as well. Our learning objectives are learn about the different types of feedback, learn how to give, receive, and seek reinforcement feedback. But in order to understand feedback, we need to understand what criticism is. Let's go ahead and look at both. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines the word criticize as to express disapproval of someone or something, to talk about the problem or faults of someone or something. And feedback is defined as helpful information or criticism that is given to someone so that they can improve or develop a product or performance. While they are very similar, there are key differences and similarities. Both criticism and feedback involve evaluation. As leaders, we need to evaluate each and every situation. However, a key difference between feedback and criticism is that criticism involves judgment and fault finding, where feedback evaluates and then passes on corrective information. Now, a lot of people always ask me, well, what about constructive feedback? This tends to have a negative connotation tied to it, so I like to refer to it as developmental feedback. And if you look up constructive, it means having or intended to have a useful or beneficial purpose. So again, even though it has that negative connotation tied to it, it's still beneficial and it's still helping someone become better. I always encourage people when they look at this slide to really understand how feedback is a positive thing. Feedback focuses on what we want. It focuses on the future. It reinforces the improved behavior. It inspires and it builds strength and confidence. So again, I really encourage people to give that feedback because even though sometimes we might be afraid to give feedback, when you look at both, you're actually doing a really good thing and a positive thing for an employee or someone. Now, there are many forms of feedback. Let's look at the different types of feedback and what situations each should be giving in. And one thing to keep in mind is that the delivery of the feedback is always key. Here we see the different types of feedback. We have reinforcing and developmental, formal and informal, solicited and unsolicited. Let's go over each one separately to get a better understanding of each feedback type and when it's appropriate to use each one. Our first one is reinforcing feedback and developmental feedback. Reinforcing feedback encourages repetitions of positive behaviors. It acknowledges and praises good work habits. Developmental feedback focuses on areas of improvement with the goal of developing a skill. It shows people where they made a mistake and how to change and improve that behavior. That is the key thing. Shows them how to change and improve that behavior. An example of a reinforcement feedback can say something like, when you did X, it led to Y. That was a great job on your part. Keep up the great work. Developmental could look something like this. If you do X, it may lead to Y. Next time when you are in that situation, keep that in mind to improve them in that area. So again, we are giving them tools so that they could be aware of the mistake that's being made or that was made, and how can they change and improve that behavior, giving them the tools to make that change. Next, we have formal and informal feedback. Formal feedback is feedback that is planned beforehand and uses maybe documentation or discipline is involved in that area for appraisals or regular performance reviews, feedback that is used to measure performance and achieve criteria. Informal feedback is feedback that can be communicated in daily interactions regarding the work that's being done. It can be delivered quickly and soon after the behavior or action occurs. I like to call informal feedback just-in-time feedback because you could just give it to them at any time, any place. An example of a formal feedback would be, I wanted to take some time with you and talk about your performance. I have scheduled some time for us next week to meet in person. And that way you're giving this person some time to meet about what it is that they also want to say as well. Informal could look like this. Do you have a quick second? I wanted to talk to you a little bit about X and how we can improve upon that. Something that's happening right away, right when you see a behavior that has occurred. Our last one is solicited and unsolicited feedback. Solicited feedback is when others ask you to comment on their performance, behaviors, or actions. Unsolicited feedback is when you are providing information about another's behavior that they may not, or maybe they are aware of it, or providing information even though you're not prompted or asked for. An example of solicited feedback can look something like this. Can you give me some guidance on how to handle X more effectively? An unsolicited can say, may I make a suggestion on how to handle X more effectively? So one is you're asking, the other one is you're telling. Now, one thing that I do recommend here is if you are an employee, I always recommend people asking their leaders for feedback. It's always good, it's always positive to do that, because then you know where you stand in terms of your performance. I usually like to go into performance appraisal without having any surprises, and if I ask for feedback throughout the year, then I'm able to understand the feedback and I'm not surprised during that performance appraisal because I know what is being said about me. So again, I encourage people to ask for feedback, seek for that feedback, because that is going to help you in the long run. Now, one thing that we're going to go over now is a tool for giving that feedback. The feedback and the delivery is always key. If you're giving someone feedback, you want to make sure that you're as specific as possible. And in order for us to help us understand that, we're going to use the STAR model, which is listed here, which is situation, task, action, result. When you are talking about the situation, you want to describe the situation where the behavior occurred, and you want to be as specific as possible. Describe the task that the employees performed, and describe the action that the employee chose in that situation, as well as describe how that result and how that behavior was beneficial. When I think about the STAR method, I always think about my first year as a consultant. I had a manager that every time he would see me in the elevator, he would say, hey, Alex, you're doing a great job. The problem was I never knew what he was talking about because it was never a specific behavior that I was doing that resulted in anything major. So years passed by and I still don't know what he was talking about. So we don't want that to happen to you. So here's an example of the reinforcement feedback. Employee is being assigned tasks with deadlines. The employee is meeting those deadlines, and because the employee is meeting those deadlines, the team is ahead of schedule. So again, you want to be as specific as possible with whatever it is that you're telling this employee and what is the result of whatever it is that they're doing. Now, just like we have reinforcement feedback, we also have developmental feedback, which is very similar. However, with developmental feedback, you are going to give the employee an alternate action and an alternate result. So you're going to suggest, what could they have done in that situation to become better or to even improve that behavior? And what would that result look like? So you're still using the same model, you're just adding the additional A to the STAR model. Here's an example of it. Same situation, the employees has the task with deadlines, but in this situation, the employee missed those deadlines. So you see here, I have given this employee an alternate action. This employee seemed overwhelmed. And so I said to the employee, hey, instead of getting overwhelmed with the task, just come up to me and ask me for help. Because if you would have done that, if you would have asked me for that help, then we wouldn't have been in this situation. We wouldn't be delayed in our schedule. So again, you're giving the employee an action that they could have done in order to make it better, and a behavior change that they could have done for the next time. That's what you want to do whenever you're giving someone feedback. You want to be as specific as possible so that they could understand that, hey, the next time that this comes around, we're not gonna be in the situation because now I've given you direction on how to improve that behavior. Here's a really great feedback tool. Anytime that you're giving someone feedback, I always tell people to write it out, put it together so that you can be prepared to have that feedback conversation. Anytime you are giving feedback, powerful, high impact feedback has three things in common here. You start with openness and humility. Feedback that is intended to help the employee rather than to show them that they were doing something wrong. And you always want to invite the employee into the problem solving process. If you have accomplished these three things, you are doing a great job as you're giving the feedback. I always tell people, remember that giving feedback is a skill, and some people are better at it than others. And when you're receiving that feedback, be respectful, listen and reflect on what has been said. It may be easy to receive that feedback. It may be hard, but again, maybe it's going to lead you to some self-discovery about yourself. Not all feedback that you're going to get is going to be given in a way that you want or like, but assume that feedback is given with good intention, because when someone takes the time to give you that feedback, it's both a courageous gift and it's something that could really help you. And again, always end with showing that thankfulness and that gratitude.